519. A survey recently found that shoplifting cost UK stores almost £2 billion a year. So it can't just be celebrities who are doing it. But down the years, famous people have found themselves in the news over things they've taken from shops without paying. Winona Ryder was caught leaving a Los Angeles department store with more than $5,000 worth of goods. Coronation Street's Tracy Shaw admitted stealing groceries. Then there's Lindsay Lohan, model and singer, also jewellery thief. To that list, you can add the name of the chef, Anthony Worrell Thompson, or as the Sun described him today, cheese and wine pilferer Anthony Worrell Thompson. The paper's story, headlined Ready Steady Crook, says he was arrested in his local branch of Tesco after 5 shoplifting episodes in 16 days. A source told the paper he was ordering blocks of cheese at the deli counter, taking bottles of wine, then putting some things through the scanner, but walking out with the rest. The paper said Mr Worrell Thompson had been given a formal caution by police, and while there was no comment last night, the chef issued a statement today. Here's what it says.
I am so sorry for all my recent stupid and irresponsible actions. I am of course devastated for my family and friends whom I've let down, and will seek the treatment that is clearly needed. I'm not the first, and I certainly won't be the last person to do something without rhyme or reason. What went through my head, only time will tell. Of course, I must also apologise sincerely to Tesco, with whom I've had a long and genuine working relationship, and to all the staff at the Henley branch, many of whom I've got to know over the years. Once again, I am so sorry, and hopefully in the future I can make amends.
How unusual is it to steal cheese? You might be surprised. Here's Professor Joshua Barnfield from the Centre for Retail Research.
The most recent data that we've collected for retail crime in the UK shows that it costs more than £4,000 million a year to retailers, and the shoplifting itself is almost £2,000 million. So it's a very expensive thing that costs the average man and woman in the street about £70 per year each person in higher prices. The most stolen item this year is cheese, though I ought to say that from what retailers tell us, thieves are prepared to steal almost anything, and that would include razor blades and whiskey, vitamin pills, lotion for the face, even things like shampoo and baby clothes and so on. All those things would get stolen. One of the interesting things is that people are stealing ordinary household products, so that meat and cheese, anything that's really gone up in price, yet is widely demanded, can be stolen. And they might steal it for themselves, they might steal it to give as a present to other people, or to sell it to other people, or to sell it to restaurants and cafes. People sometimes complain, well, you know, why is it that this person's got to repay the retailer because he's been found stealing? And the answer is that, well, when they steal this meat and cheese and so on, they often put it down their underpants in order to conceal it from store staff, and no one would really want to put that back on the shelf or purchased by somebody else.
That's Professor Joshua Bamfield. In Anthony Worrell Thompson's statement, he said he'd be seeking treatment. What might that involve? Dr. Alex Yellowlees is a consultant psychiatrist at the Priory in Glasgow.
It's likely to be one or two of a number of different types of intervention, and which ones they are would really depend on the nature of the problem that is underlying somebody's problem with shoplifting or compulsive buying, and that can be quite varied. So really the treatment itself has to be designed around whatever underlying condition is often present, and that could range from somebody having more of an addictive personality through to somebody who is actually clinically depressed and shoplifting as part of that depressive episode, through to someone with low self-esteem who is using the high of the purchases or the shoplifting to actually boost their low self-esteem, through to someone with an eating disorder who actually might have a shoplifting component to their eating disorder behaviours.
How common is it for people with some kind of mental health problem to have that manifest itself through stealing from shops?
It's not uncommon, let's put it that way, particularly in depressive disorder, eating disorders and addictions. it's quite common, perhaps up to 10 or 15% maybe at some point be engaged in some other addictive behaviour, such as shoplifting. But in the general population, statistics range from about 5 to 10% of the population may have some kind of problem of this nature. The majority of those people being women, being female anyway, usually about 80% roughly are female compared to 20% are male.
You're not an expert on the criminal justice system any more than I am, but again, in your professional area that you work in, do people who are convicted of shoplifting or who admit the crime, do they tend to get the sort of help that Anthony Worrell-Thompson is talking about, or does it depend on who you are, perhaps?
I think it depends on just how you present, and perhaps partly on who you are, because one's really hoping that the officers or the law enforcement officials involved would actually pick up that there may be a problem here, an emotional problem or a psychological problem, as opposed to just somebody stealing because they simply don't want to pay for the item. And that depends on the level of experience and knowledge and awareness of individuals at a moment in time. But I think in general terms, I think people are under-aware of the full extent and range of this kind of issue. And I still think a good percentage of the population think this is just something that people are doing for a bit of a quick thrill. And for some, that may be the case, but for an awful lot of people, it's flagging up that some other psychological issue which they are wrestling with and which they need to get some help for, whether it be their depression or their other comorbid addiction or eating disorder or obsessive-compulsive disorder, whatever.
That's Dr. Alex Yellowlees, consultant psychiatrist at the Priory in Glasgow.